Thanks for coming out to our something annual mini conference. We've had a few of these, and this is by far the I think the best turnout we've ever had. So thank you all for showing up, and maybe we'll try to find out how you heard about it so we can do this again. Rejuvenating your garden, mature garden, save time and money, giving new life to your old plants. So I'm glad to see a lot of people are interested in this subject. It's really a pruning talk. It's about pruning, and we'll get into that. Hey, there we go. That's the required slide. You're here because of the Maryland Cooperative Extension, or maybe I should say I'm here, and Master Gardeners. You do have a handout that has this on it, so that's how to get in touch with us. You're probably going to be overkilled with this information, but really that is a great way to get in touch with the Master Gardeners. IPM. I am not allowed to give a talk without talking about IPM. How many people are familiar with IPM? A lot of people in here. Wonderful. Integrated pest management. Very dry term. Basically trying to do the right thing and not just guess and apply pesticides or whatever incorrectly. You really want to make sure that you diagnose what a problem is, and then you go with the least toxic or easiest way to control something. This applies to everything you do. Bob Aldi, I don't know how many of you know him. He's a venerable master gardener and a long-time Rosarian in the area and a wonderful guy all around. He told me a long time ago he didn't like integrated pest management. He thought that was too dry, too much jargon. He liked intelligent person's method. Okay, so I think if you think about it as that intelligent person's method, and you take those standards, you'll find that you do things without making as many mistakes, and that applies to pruning as well. I love this slide. Don't let pruning be confusing. I'm pretty sure if I came up to this street and saw this stoplight, I would be confused. Pruning doesn't have to be that confusing. It's really not as complicated as some folks make it out to be. There are a few rules, but in general, you can do almost anything you want to a plant, because what's it going to do back, right? We don't want them to die. Why prune or shear? Well, typically we're doing it to try to control the outcome of our plants, but we can also do it to increase their health and to increase their survivability. We don't want them to die, we want them to live. And as you can see on the left, if you've got a lot of square, boxy hedges like that, if it snows, if it ever snows again, even ice, it tends to build up more and it tends to break those plants apart. So if you have a more pyramidal shape, a narrower shape, or a rounded shape, they're going to hold up better under snow or ice. So that's a good reason to shape plants and to prune plants. This is the most common thing I see when I'm out looking at plants, is that the one on the right is pruned how they grow naturally. The plants are reaching for light. Those upper limbs receive more light and they start to grow for the light. We come along, we prune them, and we just sort of follow the natural way the plant's growing, and we end up with this V-shaped plant. And really on the left, you want it to be an inverted V. You want it to be wider at the base and narrow at the top. That's a sturdier plant, and it's also going to be able to help those bottom leaves, which are further from the sunlight, get the light so that it's a healthier plant. So if you go and you see your plants are that regular V shape, vase shape, narrower at the bottom, we're at an excellent time of year to correct that. And that's mainly what we're going to talk about, although we got all sorts of things to talk about. What's the difference between pruning and shearing? The stuff I just skipped, it's really obvious, okay? Shearing is just indiscriminately cutting of the plant. Pruning is targeting what you're doing. Why would you want to know the difference? Because there are some plants that benefit from shearing, but most plants benefit from pruning. Shearing is a technique that you can use if you're using topiaries to get a certain shape, or you have a particular look that you want. But when you do your shearing, know that that is a harmful thing to most plants, the type of growth that it creates, and you really need to incorporate pruning as well so that you open those plants up and don't just have tight, boxy plants with all the growth on the outside and no growth on the inside. So when you shear, realize that you then have to come back through at some point and do some pruning and thinning so that air and light pass through the plant. This is a great time of year to prune. February and March, especially if you're going to be doing rejuvenation pruning or renewal pruning. That is a time of year when you can just do terrible things to your plants and they aren't going to die. You might think they're going to die. Your neighbors might think you're crazy. But what's going to happen is you're going to give new life to that plant through no power of yours. All you're doing is hurting the plant. Pruning is wounding. So when you wound a plant, it has a certain reaction. And that reaction really isn't to die, it's to grow. There are all sorts of latent or dormant buds all up and down most types of plants that never grow because all the light and growth goes to the terminal or the ends of those branches. But when you cut all those branches off, it creates a hormonal reaction, and when light strikes the plant, you get lots of new growth. This is a great time of year to do that before the spring growth starts. Okay? You can certainly do thinning as well at this time, and if you want to take like hydrangeas and start looking at them, I like to prune them a little later into the season, maybe into April, after we've gotten through most of the really cold weather. And you can take canes down and you can thin them out all the way down to the ground. You don't want to just prune the tops of something like a macrophylla hydrangea, or you might be pruning your flowers off. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. It's never the wrong time to prune dead or broken branches. So I don't care what time of year it is. If you've got damage or disease on your plants, prune it out the first chance you get. Question. The question is, can I speak to fruit trees? And yes, I do oftentimes. They never speak back. I've been talking to them, please, why don't you have any fruit? I am not an expert on fruit trees. I know something about it, and I can talk about that in a little bit, okay? But I'm not an expert on fruit trees. But what I can tell you is the University of Maryland has a group called the Master Gardeners, and they have a wonderful website, as well as the Home and Garden Information Center has a wonderful website, which you have on your handout. And you can actually go online and you can go to online publications, and you can get a lot of great information that you can download right off of that site on how to prune fruit trees. They actually have fruit trees and small fruits, blueberries, things like that. Late spring to early summer, you really want to be careful at that time of year because some plants are starting to form flower buds or are starting to flower, and pretty much you don't want to prune when something's in flower. Typically, you want to wait till after it flowers. So if the plant's in flower, skip it. A cherry tree. Right now, cherry trees are loaded with flower buds. If you prune them, you'll be lessening the amount of flowers that you have. So even if the plant needs pruning, I would wait until after it flowers, and then I would prune it. That way you get the full display, and then you can thin it out and do what you need to do to it. But if it's going to bloom in the spring, make sure you know if it flowers on old or new wood, and we'll talk about that also. So throughout the summer, you can keep and maintain hedges. All you really want to do at that time is just take off the new growth. Don't cut down into hardened wood. Just take off the new growth. It's a good time to thin your evergreens as well, and you can certainly thin shrubs during the summer. One of the things I can say is that certain plants might do better from pruning in the summer, and dogwood, native dogwood, Cornus Florida, is one. And the reason for that is you may be aware that there is a disease that is kind of wiping out the native dogwood throughout our forests and our lawns, and it's called Discula anthracnose. And Discula anthracnose thrives when the temperatures are cool and when it's moist out. So in the spring, sometimes in the fall, is when Discula is active. And if you prune dogwoods at that time of year, you really might be spreading that anthracnose. So summer can be a better time to prune a dogwood because it's hot and the anthracnose is not active. Now you can run into something else in the summer, and that's dogwood borer, and oftentimes dogwood borer is going to be attracted to pruning cuts. So make sure when you prune your dogwood that you are making good cuts and you are not wounding the tree severely during that time, because dogwood borer has a way of flying around and finding the trees that are wounded. So when you wound or prune that tree, make sure you do it in a horticulturally correct way.